Professor Galtung is the founder of the Peace Research Institute in Oslo, and he's the founder of the one of the prominent scholars of peace studies as a discipline. And he's going to talk to us today about conflict resolution and peacemaking in general. And he will make a link to the Kurdish case. So, Professor, you can start your talk now.
Thank you so much indeed. I'm deeply honored to be with you, and I'll try to give a little overview of the field. You see, we want to solve conflicts and we want to establish peace. And the first thing we have to do is to solve the conflict, identify it. We also have to do some reconciliation for the traumas that have been inflicted on all sides. We have to establish some kind of cooperation for mutual benefit. So let me start with what we see as the causes of the trouble. Structural violence is one of them, and a major one. And you see it right now, this very moment, you see it in Israel against Gaza. And Israel claiming the right to self-defense. Now, what is underlying that, as we all know, is the occupation. What Israelis call the fact on the ground. And that, of course, makes the people in Gaza prisoners of a de facto Israeli occupation. If you want to do something about it, occupation has to go. How you then establish good relations between Israel and Palestine? I think it's a West Asian community could do it, but let's leave that aside for the moment. Let us take just 1 minute on slavery. Let us say that a slave does something violent to the slave owner, and the slave owner claims the right of self-defense and kills him, burns him, flogs him. Well, we all know that the deep reason is, of course, slavery, the structural violence of slavery. Slavery has to go. And this relates to your situation, the Kurdish people. The Kurdish people, one of the biggest peoples in the world, the largest, without a state, without a home of their own. And of course there is the idea of the state as a prison of nations. Now that is structural violence. Structural violence is that it is ruled by the majority, be that Turkish, Syrian, Iraqi, Iranian. And the Kurds as a minority are then put into the corner, they are repressed, they are not given a chance to express themselves to their own identity. And it is at this point that you are launching and conducting your struggle. I would say that that struggle is best conducted in a non-violent way, but I'm in no way moralizing, critiquing about that. What is wrong about it is the rule of the majority and the marginalization of the minority. There are two solutions, or three. One is called devolution, one is called federation, one is called confederation. And they all have to do with the Transcend, the NGO mediation organization that I founded together with my Japanese wife in 1993, and now has more than 500 members in 80 countries and doing a lot of work along such lines. And what we then say is the following. The first step is human rights for Kurds. Just to be able to say, I am a Kurd, and to say that in the Kurdish language, and to identify yourself openly, and not as I was told by I remember the governor in Erzurum in eastern Turkey, when I was talking about the Kurds, and he said, you mean mountain Turks? Do you mean mountain Turks? Now, you all know the history of that much better than I do, but that was denial of your identity. The first stage, and Kurds have been struggling, fighting for that kind of recognition, and it's with admiration I look at it, but steps have been made. Steps have been made under Erdogan, under the present leadership in Turkey. Things are moving forward. The second step can be called devolution. It's an autonomy. Autonomy inside Turkey, Syria, Iran, Iraq. It exists in Iraq due to special circumstances. Self-rule. How big the area is, it's the area settled by Kurds, where the borders are, will be a matter of intense debate. I would advise modesty. The point is the autonomy more than a very extended area. When it comes to the area in Iraq, we know that the line is drawn horizontally. We all know that maybe another line would be more, let us say, representative of the conditions. We also know that there is a move in Syria. I see it as a struggle between dictatorship of the minority, Shia Alawite, and the dictatorship of a Sunni majority. And the question of autonomy, respect for the minorities, and there are many of them in Syria. One of them is Kurdish, is extremely important. The autonomy is called devolution, but it could also be a part of a process of making the four countries into federations. There you have equality, you have equity, you have respect, you have self-government, and there will be a central agency that will be responsible for the country as a whole, for foreign policy, security policy, finance policy, but with a high level of autonomy. From devolution, this is what London accords to Wales and to Scotland and to Northern Ireland, with separate parliaments, to a federation is a step. But the basic step to start with is devolution. You know, the Scottish are of the opinion that that's not enough. And they are, and have the opportunity to have a referendum, which will be coming up soon. The next step is, imagine now that you had four autonomies with a high level of self-rule, four Kurdish autonomies in the four countries, bordering on each other, coming together in that limited area where the four countries meet, more or less. And you then make a confederation of the autonomies. And that confederation of the autonomies will not move any border 1 millimeter, but it could develop its own institutions, could have a parliament, could have an executive branch for Kurdish affairs. It would have to negotiate with the four countries how much autonomy it has. And the four countries will differ when it comes to their ability to give it. But as I pointed out when I first proposed this, the name of that confederation of autonomies is Kurdistan. And the persons living there will have a right to have a passport. And at this point, any passport could show you the way to do it. You just put two names on the passport. Turkey, under that Kurdistan. Islamic Republic of, under that Kurdistan. So the point would be a double identity, and that double identity, I think, would advance the Kurdish cause considerably. Whether out of that in the future would come an independent state is a different matter. I would not even put it on the program, from my point of view, as an NGO mediator for the time being. I would rather say, keep the issue going and do the best under those circumstances. Let me repeat. We want to solve conflict. The formula is equity, mutual benefit and equal benefit, cooperation. Inside the federation you can have that. The parts of the country will cooperate, like the parts of Switzerland cooperate, like the parts of India cooperate, the parts of Malaysia, the parts of Belgium have recently joined the club of federations according to national borders between nations between culturally defined groups, groups defined by their language, by their faith, by their history, and by their geographical attachments. You need some kind of harmony. You need for Turks to understand the Kurdish situation and for Kurds to understand the Turks. And that is called empathy. Violent conflict is the opposite of that. It destroys empathy, it polarizes, it dehumanizes. It's a question of returning to more normal human relations. And in vast parts of Turkey, for instance, I find that normalization of the relationship coming. You need to look to the past, the traumas that happened. Violence was inflicted and violence is being inflicted. Violence hurts and harms. People feel stigmatized, they feel humiliated, and they are, of course, feeling deep sorrow in their hearts for the bereaved. And one idea that comes up immediately is vengeance, revenge. And you have escalation, and you have all of that has characterized the history of the relationship. To get out of that, at some point, you need kind of clearing the past. The parties have to understand that from the point of view of the parties, the situation, the structural violence, was intolerable below, and those above who tried to maintain it had their reasons. The reasons are not good enough. Clearing the past. Clearing the past to construct a future. And as I have indicated, we know what happened to the first two examples, or the second example. Slavery went. Slavery was gone. In principle, 1st of January 1863, in the 1863, excuse me, in the country where I'm sitting right now. In practice, it took quite a lot of time because this process is building equity, harmony, developing empathy for each other, and dealing with the trauma and solving the conflict as they come up. These tasks take time and they take skills. Those skills can be acquired. And all I can say is it succeeded to a large extent in the United States of America. To a large extent. Although the resistance was tremendous. I think it will succeed in Israel. I think the future of Israel can be read from what happened to apartheid in South Africa. South Africa continues, but the regime has changed. Israel will continue, but the regime will go from, let us say, hard Zionism to the soft Zionism of an Albert Einstein and a Martin Buber. There will be forces steering it in that direction. In your case, you are making progress. Since I first had the occasion to be in dialogue with Kurds in the mid-1990s, progress has been made. So let me conclude this short introduction and thanking you for the honor of giving me the opportunity to give this talk. Let me conclude by wishing you the best wishes on the road, and a part of that wish is in your ability to also see the conflict from the other sides. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Would you be able to take some questions from the...
Absolutely, I'll be delighted.
Can I have just... Yeah.
The line is not the best, so it may be changes that you have to...
Yeah, I will write it and then I'll ask you myself. The first question is about the water in the region, and the question about the water resources in the region of Middle East, and the person who has asked you the question is that he has heard you mention it previously. He was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit, and that water is more important than oil, in your opinion, Oh. So if you elaborate on that, then I'll ask the other two afterwards.
I'll do that immediately. The Middle East is a very good example, and some of this would apply to the Kurdish region too. As you all know, the water for the Arabs come from the Turkish area, as Euphrates and Tigris. It comes from Ethiopia as the Nile, and the Israelis control the Litani and the Jordan rivers. Now, there are aquifers, there is water underground, but it is limited. Now, there are two ways of managing that. Way number one is you have a Middle East, West Asian community modeled according to the European community that started 1st of January 1958. And that community is based on a council of ministers for the states and a commission for the functions. And one of them for the Middle East, West Asia would of course be water. There would be a water commission, and it would be, of course, if you had a Middle East community of, let's say, Israel and the 5 border countries, Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, fully recognized, and Egypt, that water commission would see to it that the distribution of water is just. But we are now just talking about the water from rivers, the water from precipitation, rationally collected from rain, and the water from the aquifers. So here comes solution number 2, and solution number 2 is the Mediterranean. We have enormous water resources. It's a question of distillation, catching the vapor, collecting it as water, and adding some minerals, because that water is too pure to be good for the human body. This can be done by means of parabolic mirrors, and there is a lot of sunshine in the Mediterranean area and in the Kurdish region too, but you don't have the access to the water. Now, having said that, you could imagine one at the border between Israel and Lebanon, and one at the border between Israel and Palestine, Gaza. It would be a big enterprise, and it could be a joint enterprise. So the reason why I say this is to try to make the future concrete. Not only to be constructive, but to make it concrete. And that makes me extremely grateful for the question. I hope this clarifies the kinds of things that I think can be done. Second question.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, I'd like to ask the second and the third questions together.
Please.
Firstly, there is a hunger strike in Turkey going on by Kurdish political prisoners. And what do you think about hunger strike as a non-violent form of political protest? The second question is, you've mentioned that Kurds are making progress. And what else do they need to do to move the momentum forward? And can nationalism be a way of uniting the Kurds? I hope I asked the questions correctly. Yep.
Very important questions. Turk is heroic. I admire the people who do it. It is risky. But I think the experience is that it makes a deep impression on the rulers. And the impression it makes is you communicate through the strike. It matters so much to you. It is not just an ideology, a bad word, but it matters so much to you that you're willing to put your life at risk. Generally that communicates. Nevertheless, I would be careful. You know very well that we can do without air only a minute or two, without water a very limited period, without food maybe 1 month, close to 1 month. But it leads me immediately to the second question. How does one promote one's case, one's cause? Nationalism means an attachment to your cause. And I have defined a nation as a combination of language, religion, in your case for many Sunni Islam, which of course means problems, not with Turkey, but it means problems with Iran, the current regime in Iraq, the Shiites, and less problems with the Ba'ath-based regime in Syria, challenged by a Sunni majority. But it means history. It means Kurdish history. Kurdish history. And it means Kurdish future. And it means the attachment to the 4 regions, the 4 potential autonomies we are talking about. And here comes my answer to the question. Nationalism is all of that, but that's not good enough. We need one more thing. We need an image of the future. The more you can sit down together and concretize an image of the future and see to it that it doesn't threaten in any significant way the states in which you have been imprisoned, to use the formula by Lenin, a very strong formula. That you minimize the threat to them, you ask for concessions, you ask for a new way of doing it. And then you spell out the equitable cooperation you would like to have. Not only Kurds in Turkey, with Kurds in Syria, with Kurds in Iran, with Kurds in Iraq, but Kurds with Turkey, with Syria, whatever Syria will look like, Iraq and Iran. Spell it out as positively and constructively and non-threateningly as possible. And the road is open. You'll make it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor. On behalf of the Kurdish Academic Forum and on behalf of our audience, I would like to thank you for taking your time to participate in our conference, and thank you for your effort for helping the enlightening us.
Seated in America to address an audience from at least 4 countries in England.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to disconnect now.
Positive aspect of United States of America.
Yeah.
They are not a good technology.
Yeah, thank you.